What drove you to be into law enforcement? Because it seems like all your whole career, it has something to do with law enforcement and the military, security, all that. What if you always wanted to do that since you was a kid?
No, believe it or not, I hated the cops. And it was so not to spill too many beans in my family, but my dad's side of the family was shady, to say the least. Then drug dealing, all kinds of. They've all been arrested 100 times or so, juvenile,
Right.
been in the homes and all that kind of stuff. So I was raised with a hatred of police because they were always getting harassed. But now, move forward, they weren't getting harassed; they were just doing bad shit. And the cops were just always
You're
there.
just getting in trouble.
Right. So it wasn't like, but you're just like now, you got a lot of kids in the hood that throw rocks, shoot at cars, shoot at police officers. They're taught that, right? There's an experience that led you to feel that way. And when everyone around you is like, man, fuck the cops, you pig, whatever it is, you kind of picked it up as a kid and go, hey, yeah, they must be bad. So,
it seems like they're harassing from their point of view, doesn't it?
oh, sure. Yeah. Every time they turn a corner,
There they are again.
they're always getting looked at. And then when I became a cop, I'm like, oh, yeah, this family, all of them are bad. All we got to do is just drive around the block 10 times and one of them is going to do something, So
It's the same bunch of people every day.
I was like, so it became kind of easy once I did become an officer of like identifying like behaviors, right? Like, I'm like, oh, yeah, it looks really familiar from when I was growing up. So
It's a whole different perspective.
it is. Yeah, so I was around a lot of that stuff as a kid, and I thought it was normal, right? I thought it was normal to hate the police. I thought it was normal to do, illicit activity, to see it all the time, right? I'm like, it's interesting from being a father now. Like if I was doing something wrong and my son walked in the room, there's a reaction I'd have. I'd be like, I'd be like, hey, get out of here. Right, whatever that reaction would be. I got that all the time. I'd come in, hey, I'll be like, hey, get the hell out of here. I'm like, oh shit, like I leave. I'm like, what are they doing? Like I was able to pick up, like from a psychological standpoint, I was able to pick up, okay, I just got yelled at. Someone's probably doing something they shouldn't be doing. I don't know what it was.
You put that together as a kid.
Yeah. So I know we've talked many times over the years, and I'd be like, man, I think I'll nail something about you.
Right.
And you're like, how do you know that? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm not Nostradamus, but
You're good at it.
I was really good at picking up stuff, I think, when I was younger, because I was around so much craziness that normal was like peace. Like, oh man, there's nothing crazy going on. Like, that's easy. But it made you be very intuitive with the way you think, because you had to navigate that as a passenger of life, right? You had to kind of always pay attention to what was going on, because you're like, I don't know, I got a gut feeling this might not be something good. But hey, I'm in the back seat.
I talked about that with a friend of mine at work one time about reading the room. Because as a kid, your parents would fight or whatever, or your dad would be drinking or whatever it was. And you would kind of, exactly what you just said, you kind of read the room on what kind of day is this going to be? And that's exactly what you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, because when you get into like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? You got safety and security is number one.
Number one.
You got to feel that way. You got to have that. Otherwise, 2, 3, and 4 aren't going to work out too good, right? So
Yeah, it
was
even
like
supersedes food. No,
right.
Food is actually the bottom part of it.
But it's like being able to recognize danger. This is good. This is bad.
Yeah.
If you inherently know that when you're younger, it makes life a lot easier, right? When you're recognizing dangers and all that kind of stuff. Some people who grew up in a very sheltered life, they just walk right out into traffic. I didn't even know cars could hit people, right? They're just that clueless. But when you grow up around a lot of situations like that, you start making notes in your notebook. Like, okay, don't do that. That's bad. Oh, they're the police. I don't like them.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it's going to be. So then I would think I was in second grade, and I get off the bus, but the bus let me off on a corner, which is about a third of a mile from our house. There's police everywhere, and the road was blocked off, and I'm like, what the? So I get off, and I go right to the officer there, and they're like, do you live down there? I'm like, yeah, I live down at the bottom of the hill. They're like, oh, hold on. They call all right, go ahead. So I start walking down there, and I'm like, wow, I wonder what's going on. This is really weird. And as I'm getting closer, I'm like, dang, that looks like it's at my house. Oh, shit. that is in my house. I'm like running with my big old book bag down there. Another cop stops me, and I see my parents in the back of a squad car. And I'm like, in their like SWAT helicopter. Back then, I think they were all in brown. You know, the big UPS van, SWAT van.
I don't remember this story. I don't think you've ever told me that.
Yeah, so I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then they let my mom out of the car, and I run over there. I'm like half in tears, like, what's going on? She's like, oh, it's okay, it's okay. They're just looking for your uncle. I'm like, oh, okay, well, where is he? She's like, I don't know, he ain't here. Well, they did a search warrant on her house looking for my uncle, and he wasn't. I think he was in Florida or something. He wasn't there, but he had done something again. You know, it wasn't like the first time. But the next day in school, front page of our little old paper, you know, there's picture
Your
of our
house? Oh, God.
One I thought was cool. You know, I was like, oh, look at that, I'm famous. But it started to. I remember bringing the paper with me to school. I wanted to show everybody. And, oh, man. But I thought it was like a teacher or something had said, oh, yeah, I know about them. My family members, like, almost like semi-notorious, right? Like, oh, I know about them. Like, you know, I've heard about them before.
Wow.
But my last name is different. So when my parents got married after I was born, so I elected to keep my mom's last name. I mean, with the name Demetrius, you hard to get teased. You know,
Right.
like, your parents black? Like, no, they were hippies, man. They just thought that was a cool name. And I didn't want to have Demetrius Ziegenhagen, this big old long name, so I kept my last name as Ritt. But that's when I first started to kind of pay attention, right, of like, man, this isn't normal. And anyway, I lived with that for a long time, and then finally my dad really stopped hanging out with his brothers all the time, and got into carpentry and all that kind of stuff. And then he was more of a family guy.
But he was as notorious as they were, or was he kind of like the good kid?
I think he was the younger brother, right? You know, you still get involved.
More of innocent.
Oh yeah,
more innocent.
Like as a juvenile, I think he's probably been arrested 100 times. He was in the juvenile like camp, you know,
Wow.
go to reform school and all that stuff. So he's in and out of there all the time, and you know, I think most of that's just either you're running from your dad, you know. So my grandfather was he passed when I was younger, but he was a pretty bad alcoholic, but he was in Iwo Jima, right? So I mean, those guys who came back from that war came back. They didn't get 4 weeks of leave, and you know all this, you know, go to the VA. Like they went right back to the factory, so they never had an ability to cope with the things that they saw, or the tools that probably we have nowadays to deal with.
Yeah, because everybody's got it now, right?
Yeah, so you know, and he was very abusive, so he used to beat the crap out of them, and so they had a hard childhood. You know, one, getting in trouble, two, staying away from their dad, and then when they got in trouble, they had to face their dad, who was, you know, really, really, really abusive and alcoholic. So they were all in some varying levels of, you know, jail and prison and all that kind of stuff growing up, and it was normal though, and it was still fucking cops, hate cops, you know, all they do is harass you, whatever, you know, whatever they said, that's what I said, and even like graduating high school, I started getting in trouble, you know, just hanging out with, you know, guys I grew up with, and you know, when you're living in a small town, there ain't shit to do except try to be the toughest guy, you know.
What town was that?
It's called Racine, Wisconsin.
Yeah, I've actually driven through there. It's
a little south
north,
of Milwaukee.
South of Milwaukee.
South of Milwaukee, okay. North of Chicago. So in the 80s, we had and now that I know this from a historical standpoint, it's different. But when I was in probably junior high in the 80s, the welfare system changed in Wisconsin, and we ended up having a lot of gang members and riffraff from Chicago move up to Wisconsin. One, better benefits, you know, government benefits and all that, safer. So we had a mass migration of, you know, vice lords, gangster disciples, you know, Asian Crips, like you name it, all the gangs were there. In this little old
little Racine,
little old, you know, 80,000, I think it's probably 60,000 back in the day, and some of my friends that I grew up with, you know, started hanging out with some of these guys. And for me, I kind of had an interesting friendship circle because I was an athlete, so I got to hang out with all the jocks. I was a musician, so I hang out with all the band geeks, right? I was kind of a metalhead back then too. So like as a musician, I was like playing drums. So I was in different bands. Kung Fu was like a real big thing back then, ninjas and karate and stuff. So I had like my little circle of friends that all got into like martial arts. And I just kind of was easy to navigate. I could just kind of hang out with anybody I wanted. And it wasn't, I didn't have to affiliate myself with anybody. I didn't have to join a gang. I had buddies that were in the gangs, but I didn't really, never got jumped in or anything, but I never got asked to like go initiate someone or fucking break into a house or something. So I just had a lot of friends in all aspects, which in turn goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of when you have that big of a base of friends that all act different, black, white, Hispanic, anything, you can get along with everybody. Two, you know a lot more about life. Like, I had a great friend in high school, Jewel, a great wrestler, now on the wrestling team. I'd stay at his house on the weekend. We'd be wrestling out in the front yard, backyard, watch Sanford and Son at night, just cracking up. Never even thought anything about black, white. Never even was an issue. We're just good friends. We treated each other good. Parents welcomed me into his house. Never even was a topic. Like now everything's racist. Everything is racial in some way. Never even was an issue. Across the next street over, Hispanic family, Jimmy and Joey, didn't know that they were like in the Latin Kings because we just all in their backyard playing football. It didn't matter back then. It's interesting. So my first day of high school, I was just like, it's so big and new, right? You're just, I don't think we had like 2,000 kids, so it's a huge, very integrated school. And there was like a big commotion, so I like ran down the hallway to see what was going on. And like Joey's out there with like a sword out of a cane, like fighting people, like, I was like, what? I was like, dude, we just like hanging out in the summer riding bikes. And like now you're like trying to murder somebody with a sword in the high school. I was like, what the, where have I been? So that blew my mind of like, wow, I didn't ever see that side of a lot of my friends. And
that was which one was that? The Latin King?
Yeah, the Latin King. They're fighting with some bikes.
They're born. Way I understand that. They're born into whatever position they're in or something like that.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Is that true to that? Because I was watching a trial on TV, and one of the witnesses was a Latin King, and he was the head of that whatever bunch that was down in Miami, and he was, the way I understood, he was born into that position.
Yeah, I don't know how.
I have to research
that is. I mean, I know that a lot of the infighting then happens because they're trying to move up in positions, right? So maybe there's a hierarchy over there that.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Is familiar, like a family tie type situation, but anyway, through high school, I was really young too. Like I was a year. Like I said, I was 16 when I was a senior, turned 17, so I was really young. So I started school when I was 4. And now they start kindergarten when you're 5 or whatever. So I was really young when it came to like body development. I was tiny, that kind of stuff when I was growing up. But anyway, through high school, no big deals. Mostly sports, all that kind of stuff. My family situation sort of leveled out as far as Dad had a very consistent job. Mom worked as well. We're very, very hardworking. Like we talked a million times, man. My dad was like the workhorse,
He still is almost, even being retired, he still works hard.
Yeah, so you learn this, you try to learn things from your parents. We always try to revolt first. Like, I'm going to revolt, and I'm going to show it to do it my way. And then when that shit don't work later in life,
you'll come back around.
Man, I'm never right about that.
That's such a hard thing to figure out.
But I'm trying to remember I don't remember exactly what age I was in, but my uncle Jesse got killed, and I had to been like junior. I think it was right at the end of junior high.
Is that the one they were looking for, or is that another uncle?
And another one. He was down in Florida, and I think they got in some kind of big tiff with some bouncer at a nightclub, and I think they're on America's Most Wanted or something. They like killed some guy and then framed another guy, and
Wow.
yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. But anyway, my uncle got killed, and my dad had to go down there to kind of help. I think my uncle Jesse owned like a junkyard, auto salvage place, so he had to go down there and kind of help with the estate, try to figure things out. And I remember him and my mom were like, kind of arguing a little bit before they left, and it was really about like, now don't go down there and try to fix this. You got kids, and you come home. And I remember I was like, every night I was scared. I was like, oh shit, man, like I hope he don't go down there and try to find the guy, because he was going down there to meet my uncle Armin, who's since passed away, and that was one they were looking for at one time. And Armin was like a mafia boss. He was like in the biker gangs and all that kind of stuff. But he was big, mean, kind of had like an Elvis personality though. You just couldn't help but love the guy. But I was like, oh man, get those guys taken up. Shit, man, I might not ever see my dad again.
Yes, settling the state may not have been what they had on their mind.
Yeah, but I was cognizant of like the ramifications of what could have happened. It wasn't just like clues like, hey, can you bring me back some Laffy Taffy from Florida? I was like, oh boy, he comes back alive.
Stop by Disney and give me a stuffed animal.
Yeah, so anyway, growing up, I didn't really I didn't really have any bad interactions with police. I think when I had like my 18th birthday party at a hotel. It was funny as hell. So clueless I was for the situations. But back then, like, it was really hard to get a hotel room, so I had my buddy get the hotel room for us, and we had a big party, and then like way too many people came, so then the cops got called, and I had a birthday cake, and it said "Happy Birthday, Dieter." That's my nickname, Dieter. And cops came, threw everyone back in the room. We're all like, they're like, "Is this your party?" I'm like, "I don't know what you're talking about," And then one of the cop goes, "Dieter." I'm like, "Look," I'm like, "Fuck," like, dude, like, get him. Like, shit.
Wasn't his first rodeo.
So then it was hilarious. I got detained, and they called my parents, and my dad comes, and he's like, "Well, what happened?" And the guy's like, "Well, they had the party." He's like, "Well, what happened?"
Yeah, was they arrested?
Like, well, it was underage drinking. He's like, "That's it?" Oh, all right, easy. High five. Like, good. He didn't get in real trouble.
Shoot nobody.
Yeah, so it was just, But anyway, started hanging out with some of the guys I grew up with. We were just getting into shenanigans and fighting and doing stuff. So it was, nothing really bad, just normal alpha male type stuff. And then I wasn't doing good in college. I was, athlete in college and trying to do them both, trying to, hook up with chicks and go clubbing and keep doing music and wrestle and this and this and that.
You've always had a lot going on.
Yeah, so I always
that's a normal thing for you.
Yeah, I always had 10 things on the oven.
Right.
None of them going great, but 10 of them going. And I got arrested for fighting. I had like a disorderly conduct, and then I was like walking back from a party, had like a trespassing, just a bunch of small ordinance and misdemeanor stuff, but I still was like, I hate the cops, they're all out to get me, whatever. But it wasn't till I got into a little bit more trouble, and the judge said, "Mr. Ritt, I highly recommend you consider one of the service branches, because I don't want to see you in my courtroom again." Now, I was like, yeah, what's up, whatever, And but it kind of stuck with me, right? So then that event happened. My dad's friend, Babalu, he actually showed up to court with me, and he was trying to help me out and stuff, and he didn't want my dad to find out about it, because it's like, great, you're going to be one of the guys in the family now. And well, my dad's like, "Hey, we're going to go see Uncle Armin." He was in a federal penitentiary in Wisconsin there. So the whole way I just acted like a tough guy. I just drove up there. And we go into the prison, go through all the little checkpoints and empty the pockets, all this stuff. And we get to the prisoner visitation room. My uncle comes out, and I was like hoping, because he was kind of like a bad guy hero. You know what I mean? He always treated me really good. He was the uncle that treated me the best. There was just something about him, like, like if you saw like a mafia don, you'd be like, "Oh yeah, that's cool." There's just something cool about it at that time. Anyway, I come in. And he's like, "You want to fucking be like me? You want to be like this asshole over here?" He's like, just bitched me out in front of everybody. I was like, damn.
Like a scared street.
Yeah, I was like, that was not the thing I thought I was going to be getting when I went to see my uncle,
He kind of thought he was going to be proud of you a little bit.
Yeah, it's kind of, a little mad respect, whatever.
Right.
But no. And I remember I didn't talk to my dad the whole way home. I was just so, pissed. But that whole ride home, it was a wake-up call. Because I was like, damn, there's some old ass motherfuckers in prison. I was like, I'm one bad mistake away. I realized that. Like, even though I was just doing dumb, normal guy stuff, I was like, things could go bad. You could fight somebody, they could fall, hit their head, get killed, you're done. You know?
That's
so
right.
so I had a good wake up call from that. You know, I wouldn't say that I was anywhere near like a criminal or anything, but I just didn't really care at the time. And so then that was a Saturday. So the Monday I went to the mall. We had this little mall grocery store where we had all Army recruiters and all that stuff. So I went in and I'm like, went right to the Army because my cousin 1 year ahead of me, he went to the Army. So he was like, oh, you got to join. I was like, oh, look, people tell me what to do. I'm going to get yelled at. He's like, dude, just don't fuck up and you're not going to get yelled at. Your mom yells at you worse than you're going to get yelled at. You know? All that clicked. Went in, went to the Army recruiter. I was like, I need to get out of town. Like, let me hit the reset button. He's like, well, we got to get you some waivers. I had to get some waivers. I think I had my driver's license was like revoked and stuff too. I
Oh my Lord.
like speeding tickets and stuff. You know, when you got the big old 15-inch woofers in the back, you know, max your credit card out you had to have them. But anyway, so all that changed. As soon as I went to the Army and went off to basic training, that was like 91, 90. I think I signed up in 91 because Gulf War was going on. And I was like, hell yeah, I want part of that. Shit was over before I even left. Before I got my waivers.
It didn't last long, did it?
Yeah. But they were still kind of like talking about maybe going. So even in basic training, you know, they were like, hey, this thing, you know, might flare back up again. But it was in basic training where everything in life clicked for me. It was, you work hard, you work harder than the next guy, you have a very, very high chance of being successful. You're not going to be successful just because you work harder. And I kind of started seeing where I racked and stacked talent-wise, like my ability to just think on the fly, you know, persevere through any kind of, you know, athletic stuff. That was easy. My ability to like read maps and, you know, that was just super easy. It wasn't even a challenge. So as soon as I got done with that, I came back, went to town. I was a reserve. I went back in town. I was like, you know, I had
feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, I had the ability then to distance myself from friends that were bad because I would say, hey man, I can't be hanging out. I can't go to this party because if they smoke weed, I don't want to get drug tested. You know, I use it as a good excuse to sort of get away from the bad stuff that I don't want to be a part of, and then turn the corner. So I went back into college, man, made the dean's list. I was just like, bam, bam. And I realized how much stuff you can get done in a day.
So that was the Army Guard you joined?
Reserves at the time.
Reserves, okay.
Reserves. And then along that way, I still never thought about being a cop. I mean, it was just one of those things where I was like, you know, not for me. But the neighbor across the street, Brian, he ever since he was a little kid, you'd hear a siren. That dude would drop whatever he's doing, run out to the road and just watch an ambulance, fire truck, police drive by. He always wanted to be a cop or law enforcement.
Since he's a little kid.
Yeah, so, and many years later, I mean, you know, I'd been in the military a bunch of times and deployed and all that stuff, and still didn't think about it. Still wasn't anything that was on my list. But he called me. He's like, "Hey man, I'm gonna take the police test. You know, why don't you come with me?" I was like, "I don't want to be no damn cop." You know, like crazy. You know, and also because at that time, you had to be a minority or female or something to get hired, at least on a smaller department. You know, they had the EEO stuff back then, kind of like DEI stuff nowadays. But anyway, this was for Milwaukee, a bigger city, and he finally badgered me enough to talk me into it. So I'm like, all right, so I went and took the test. But when I went there, there was a line all the way around the whole block. Like I never took a test. So
really?
Big. Yeah, I mean, like hundreds and hundreds of people, and then when you get in, you're in this massive, huge auditorium with desks, and you're just, you know, I didn't even see him. And that was before I had a cell phone, so it wasn't like I could, you know, call. I'm just like, I looked around, didn't see him. Went home and finally got a hold of him later, and he was like, I was like, dude, where were you? He's like, oh man, I overslept. I'm like, you asshole.
He didn't even go.
I'm like, man, I took that damn test. Your ass wasn't even there. Because you're always thinking like, oh, I go in there with my buddy, maybe we'll go to training together.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then a couple months later, I got a letter that said, hey, congratulations, you made phase 1. come take a physical, come do a fitness test, all that stuff. So I kind of went through the whole battery of things. And
But all the trouble you got in didn't
no, I was
affect
thinking it
it?
would. I thought it would. It helped that a lot of it was sort of right in the border of juvenile adulthood, because they sent out the background investigators and all that stuff. And even my buddies were like, "Really?" I'm like, yeah, man. Hopefully. So anyway, got going on that a little bit, and then the day came where I had to let my parents know
That you were going to be a cop.
Yeah. And I was always this kid, so imagine this. I used to come down on your desk, right? I'll be like, "Hey man, I got an idea." You're like, "Oh God, that's gonna go over well."
Yeah. They'll like that.
Yeah. So I would go to their house. I'd knock on the door. I'm like, "Hey, just want to talk to you guys about something." They look at each other like, "Okay, now what? What's the next greatest idea that you got?"
Exactly.
And I was like, "I want to be a cop." My dad's like, "What the fuck are you gonna do that for?" He was not happy about it.
And he freaked out.
He's like, Jesus Christ. My mom's like, "You're going to get killed." And I'm like, "Where?" In Milwaukee. "Oh, Jesus, it's even worse."
Yes.
So they were all upset about that. But interesting, my uncle was in prison still. And
The one that bitched you out.
yeah, and I remember calling him. I was like, I didn't need family approval. But I had thanked him too, because on the deployment I thanked him. I was like, "Hey, I just wrote him a letter and just said, hey, my interaction with you in prison changed my life. I said, this was a very profound moment in my life. I want to thank you." I said,
That had to mean a lot to him to get that in prison.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so when he called and I said, hey, Armin, what's going on? "You're never going to believe it." And he's like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I'm going to be a cop." He's like, "Ah, fucking pig. Good for you." He basically said, like, "Good, man, turn this family around. Like, everyone's got their head up their ass and we're doing bad stuff. Like, good for you." And it really felt like a validation, right?
Right.
So I was like, wow, I'm definitely the black sheep of the family. Like, a bunch of my cousins all went to prison, and a couple of them have since passed from things that they've done. One was a prostitute. Oh man, I got all of them.
Is your uncle still in prison?
No, he's passed. Yeah, he got out, and he lived a pretty good life after that. And I think he had like either prostate or pancreatic cancer, one of those. He had a bunch of stuff going on in the passing. But yeah, man. Then I started. I went to the academy, did well. I won all kinds of awards. Top shot, and top. It was like the guest speaker, all kinds of stuff, and hit the ground running. And it was really interesting because when I first, you have like 6 weeks with one field training officer, 6 weeks with another field training officer. Then it's called war horsing. You just work with other people who already have partners. Like if that partner is off, you're off today, I'll fill your role with that guy. So you kind of do that for a while for like your first year.
Then you get your own, huh?
Yeah, you can. I got lucky because like first or second, maybe second day, got in the Bigfoot chase, chased the guy down. Partner grabbed him. This guy was trying to stab him with a screwdriver. I like totally crushed this guy's soul, So it was good that the officers that I work with know that, okay, he can handle himself. He's composed, he can fight, he's safe. I didn't know where the hell I was running to. These are all new streets. I think it's 2 a.m. You're running through yards, pitch dark, chasing some unknown dude with whatever they got in their pocket. You don't know. It's an interesting.
I can't imagine.
It's an interesting dynamic because not everyone has that gene in them to chase something that's scary, right? And I was like, hell yeah! It was just like an adrenaline rush. Like,
it's interesting you say that because I played this video game where what is the name? PUBG, where you get dropped out of a C-130, and so I'll be playing it, and I'm not good at the video game at all. So I can't ever grab the gun and shoot with it. So I just hide places. So when I play with my son-in-laws, when they hear gunfire, they'll run toward it. I'm like, what the hell are you doing? Go the other way.
Yeah, there's an interesting dynamic of that, right? Because not everyone has that. And I'm not saying that I'm some super Jesus that isn't afraid of anything, but you either got it, you don't. Because there's plenty of guys.
And people know exactly.
Yeah, and there's plenty of people that are great officers. They are just not cowboys. And I was looking at myself as like a cowboy. Like, I'll do the crazy shit. You come in, help me with the reports. You know, we'll get all this, just take care. I'll do that.
Remember when we were going to be privatized? I said, you go chase the motherfucker. I'll just hang out.
Exactly. Yeah. So did well. You know, I was very respectful of all the officers. I did whatever they wanted me to do, the hardest, the easiest. You know, made pretty good decisions. But I had a lot of drug arrests. Imagine that.
Yeah, surely not.
Just when I was a patrol cop, and I just had a real knack for just seeing it. Like I'd just see a person, and I'd be like, nah, hey, come over here, man. Like you just kind of have a knack for it. Some people are really good at traffic. Some are really good at accident reconstruction. So like that was probably my thing.
The drug,
narcotic stuff, because I had been around all of it my whole life. The smell of it.
You've been reading that since you was a kid.
Yeah, and I thought that was normal. I thought everyone did that shit. You know, I'd go to other people's houses and be like, well,
you like,
where's
sure
all the drugs?
Exactly.
You got drugs here? Place is lame, you know. I mean, I was never into it, but that was just a thing that was, it made sense to me. So I was very lucky. I did patrol for, I don't know, a year and a half, became a firearms instructor for the department, maxed out. Any kind of training I could go through, I'd put myself through training. Anything that was available, I'd sign up for it. I just like dedicated myself. And it's interesting because you asked me, like, well, how did you even know that you would like law enforcement work, or how did this become such a big part of your life? I had taken this personality test, and I think, I don't remember which one it was called, but I came back as a defender. Like my personality type was a defender. Mm-hmm. Like I hate bullies. I don't like people picking on people. I want structure and order, but I like to defend people who need defending. Mm-hmm. And if there's no one to defend, maybe that's not a good job for me. You know, like I just feel like I'm really good at taking care of people. Mm-hmm. Maybe not like a nurse, but like in that context. So that's something that like my personality didn't even know that aligned with some of that. And it was just something that I liked doing. But got into narcotics, had fun with that, had really good partners, million good stories, you know, worked undercover, you know, went to SWAT and sniper school and did all the crazy stuff you ever wanted to do. And in the meantime, I had switched from the Army, went to Army Reserve, Army Guard, did that for a couple of years, and I went and I wanted to get into pararescue in the Air Force. And there's a big old long wait, like a year and a half wait to get in. Mm-hmm. I went and took a preliminary like physical fitness test, made it. They're like, okay, we'll get you on the list. But now I was like trying to get out of the Army, go in the air. I don't want to have a big gap in my service, right? Because now you don't get credit for the whole year. Mm-hmm. So then I went and interviewed, and by the grace of God, the base had an opening for an intel analyst. I was like, do you get to kill people? Like, like, do you get to do cool stuff? And they're like, well, not really. You know, you do this and this. You get to go to survival school and do this. I'm like, all right, I'll do that until this other guy calls to get me in the special operations.
So you got to go to survival school being an analyst? Really?
Yeah, you get to do, you know, this depends, you know, if the schools are available, like, you know, a lot of counterterrorism type stuff. So got into that so I took a leave of absence from police department, went in, and while I was in intel school, enlisted intel school, 9/11 happened. So that changed all of our lives, mm-hmm. right? When you think of like profound moments in the history of this country, mm-hmm. that was one of those like, I've got to do more. Whatever more is, I don't know what more is, but I got to do more because chasing crackheads and drug dealers in Milwaukee is not more. It's a Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound. You arrest this guy, a new guy comes in tomorrow. This time he's got a Motorola radio. You arrest that guy, next time he comes in, he's got 3 cell phones and a lookout. They evolve, but it's the same shit over and over again.
Yeah, because I remember quitting my job at the factory and went back and right. Working on aircraft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so same exact feeling. Mm-hmm. I got to do more, whatever more is. And then at that time, having, you know, TS clearance and being in the intel world, I had buddies that I went to school with that were working for agencies or whatever around the world. So I got a call. I was out in Vegas just partying one weekend with a bunch of guys. And I got a phone call that was like, hey, there's a job. I can get you on this job out here in D.C. working for Homeland Security on a thing. I'm like, really? How much does it pay? Oh, damn. You can get paid more than I did as a cop. Like, oh. I'm dying almost every day for $25 an hour. What the hell I was getting paid back then? Like, damn, okay, yeah. So they flew me out, interviewed with the CEO of, which is now Mantech. I think it was called Greyhawk or something back then. And was a contractor, but worked in a terrorist watch center. So ICE and Homeland Security were like merging and all this stuff at the time. So then I got to work MS-13. Got to use a lot of the skills, but on a bigger scale. Right? Wow, like I'm not just like chasing one guy. I'm like trying to piece together these whole networks and and figure all this stuff out. So that was sort of my first like entryway into trying to do something bigger. But it was all under the same umbrella, right?
Right.
Keep people safe.
Same deal.
Unravel the mystery. Find the bad guy. There's some sort of mental gymnastics that goes with that of trying to solve the puzzle that makes you wake up the next day and like try to find the needle in the haystack. So that's kind of how I really got into the bulk of it. Was that process right there? That was my first 5 or 6 years of just intel and law enforcement stuff, and then it kind of just brought me into the federal lane for a while.
Do you think, and you were saying it's an umbrella of that whole security mindset, but maybe it goes deeper than that, because like you're saying, when you were a kid, you'd read the room and things were amiss somehow. Maybe it's like a deep need to make things right. You know?
I do.
You think that has anything to do with it?
I think so. I think there's a pride in family, right? Like, I didn't know better growing up. I didn't even know we were poor until I was in 6th grade, right? 6th grade is the beginning of junior high school. And you go to the lunch line, and I had the meal tickets, free lunch, because we were poor. I didn't know we were poor. I just knew I didn't have anything fancy, but I didn't have any people in my circle that was, except the kid across the street, Brian. His dad worked at Johnson's Wax, so they had a little money pool, all that stuff. But we thought they were like, wow, they're rich,
crazy rich.
And they're just middle class, right? But I go to lunch line, and the free lunch was in this line. Paid lunch is over here, and just the looks that you would get. I remember going like, oh, I prepaid for this, like it was such an overwhelmingly shit feeling to have people look at you like you're a piece of crap, you're poor, you're nothing. I'm like, it all kind of hits you at once. If you're growing up, you're learning new stuff, new circles. You went from playing Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee to being around more grown people. So you're not playing with toys anymore. You're doing other stuff. So that was the first time I had a feeling of like, wow, man, I don't like this feeling. And then it got to like, you'd hear comments like I'd go to a friend's house and be like, oh yeah, we know your dad, or yeah, we heard about your family. Yeah, just that comment was like, what the hell, But I carried all that baggage with for many years, and then as I learned more, I was even more like embarrassed, more like, what the hell, like. You start to realize like that was wrong, like that. I didn't know all that stuff was illegal. Like I had no idea, like holy shit, we were totally like, oh my god. And then for a while I was a little bit resentful, to my dad, because I'm like, you put me in this situation, like who does that, and it took me a few years when I got older to go. Sometimes they don't even know. I mean, like, dude, I became a dad at 47. Like, I knew a lot of shit. My parents were 17, 18. I didn't know anything. They barely knew how to wipe their own ass, So,
yeah, I wasn't responsible enough at 17 to have a child.
Like I said, all I thought about was speakers and non-skip CD player. What do I know?
So maybe that's why, because you're always so orderly on how you want things. And it could be just that feeling that's lasted through your whole life. It's like, I want to get this right. Because we talked about that several times about how I'll just rush in and do something, and you'll spend a lot of times making sure it's right. You know, you've said that you're like, how could I've done this all and we end up in the same place? Because I had this like,
Oh yeah.
you remember the movie Amadeus Mozart?
Yeah.
So he's sitting there with no effort at all. He's this lunatic that can play the piano, and the guy that studied his whole life, he hates him because why would you let him have this and you don't even give a shit about it? You know, so I'm just like whatever and end up the same place you're at.
Oh my God.
Not the same level, but you
Oh,
you
yeah,
know what I'm saying.
100%. Yeah.
But so maybe that you're kind of guided by always trying to make it to be the right thing.
Yeah.
You ever thought about that?
100%, man. There's two people in my life. The two most profound people in my life is my father and my grandfather, Rit. So my grandfather, Rit, I could barely remember when he wasn't in a wheelchair. So that had to have been probably 4 or 5 years old. He had the walking canes, and he would kind of go in and out of the wheelchair, and then he was in a wheelchair fully. He had MS, and it hit him pretty hard because then he couldn't talk, and at first he could talk a little bit, then he couldn't talk, and then he couldn't use his arm, and then he's like, we'd have this like little card with words on it, and he'd point at it.
Oh Lord!
And I mean, but this dude was my hero, man, because around their house, he had like railings. He'd put up shit around the house. He'd pull himself around, ropes and stuff to help get on to the bathroom. He hated anyone having to help him. Right, so independence is what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd get him into the basement, and he's in with a little drill lathe. This one hand, he barely can work, and he's still trying to build stuff, and he'd be frustrated. God damn it, and you're like, and so the reason that's important is my cousin Gary. He was a year older than I am, and he lived a little closer to my grandparents. But we had to trade off weekends, like go cut their grass. And you're just a kid. I'm playing soccer and softball or baseball and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, you want to do fun stuff. You want to like ride your bike 12 miles to go see Grandpa cut his grass with one of those,
the ones with the spinny damn blades.
Yeah,
I used one of them one time. They're crazy.
But so Gary was there a lot more. Gary was more mature than I was, and he would go help out my grandparents all the time. Mm-hmm. So one Christmas, we're over there, and my grandma, she had breast cancer, and she ended up dying of throat cancer. But Gary gets this big ass fire truck, right? And I got this like little tiny like plastic ambulance or something, and I was crying. I was like, so I went to my mom. She's like, "Why are you crying?" And I was like, "Gary got the big truck, and I got the little one, whatever." And my grandma overheard it. My grandma was,
what tragedy!
No games. She was like, "Throw mama from the train, grandma." Right? She was no shit. She's like, "Well, maybe if you did more around here, Gary shows up every weekend." She punked me out. 100% accurate though.
Wow.
I cried. I was so heartbroken. But that right
she
there,
was straight with you, though,
right there, was like, dude, you're like, however old I was, I don't know, 10, 11. Fact. Hit me in the face with some facts. It's like, you work hard, you get more. You play your games, you come up with excuses not to do something, you get nothing. And this guy gets everything. It was like that profound of a life. And I think that drives me to this day. But it revolves around my grandfather because, we had to put him in a nursing home, and our house is like 4.5 miles. So I'd run to go see him, and I'd chat with him and hang out with him, and I'd run back home. And it was like a great workout because I was like so excited to see him on the way there. And he was so excited, like, "Wow, you ran here?" Like you could just see it in his eyes that he just wanted someone to visit him. He just wanted like someone to care, even though he couldn't talk. He'd slap his knee. I'd just tell him. I'd sit there for an hour and just tell him stories like, "Oh yeah, and I met this girl. And this is this." He'd be cracking up.
That's awesome.
And I know that it was a really important factor to take care of someone who couldn't take care of themselves. So the defender thing. Didn't know that at the time. Mm-hmm. So much of my life, whenever I like kind of hit a wall, like I'm tired, or I want to, I got to run 5 more miles. I got to do whatever I got to do. I always think of him. I'm like, that dude couldn't do anything because he had a disease, I owe it to him to give everything I can possibly give every day. I could end up like him. You know, every once in a while my foot will go numb. I'm like, oh shit, is this it? And I'm like, oh shit.
Oh yeah.
Look up in the
oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, God, no, I just sat on it wrong. You know, but
I'm so bad about it. It's
I remember I got to that book.
yeah.
You're gonna die. Anyway, so
God, I'm terrible about that.
so my dad was very, very, very hard working. So once he got into carpentry, that was his. He found his niche. He found.
God,
his
he's
thing.
good, isn't he?
Oh, he's good. He works really hard. Yeah. So, one, the instance with my grandmother telling me about, you know, you got the ambulance and not the fire truck because you don't work hard. And then my dad and I put a bicycle on layaway. It was like a GT Performer. It had the little pegs. You could spin the wheel and stuff. I don't know. It was expensive. It was $150 or what it was way back in the day. That's a lot. So like anytime I cut the grass, I got allowance. I did anything I could. I'd put $1 for it here and there, and I was going to have it paid off in a year. Then my dad came home from work, and he'd always come home from the construction site with a bunch of scrap wood and shit, you know. And come in, hey, Peter, come over here and help me unload the truck. Well, he came home one day. I was like playing Atari or something, whatever. I was doing nothing important. Comes in, hey, help me unload the truck. And I was like, me, you know, like, all you ever do is get junk and like slam the door. And I walk out there, open up the door, the bike's in there. He comes
After you get through
he comes out there.
After you get through bitching
You
about
don't appreciate nothing. You know, like the 2 fingers. And it broke my heart, man. Like, see what happens?
Yeah.
You get ahead of your skis.
right.
You don't think things fall like it's about other people. So, like, those 2 little tiny lessons are huge, though, in my life. Of,
Right,
like,
yeah.
work your ass off. Like, don't even care what the end prize is. Just work really hard, because sometimes the prize will present itself in the middle of all the work. So, hard work's never been a thing for me. You know, ever since that, I've been like, man, even now, 6 a.m., midnight. Very rare that I fall asleep before midnight. I mean, I'm always...
It's me. It's very rare. I fall asleep before 3 o'clock in the morning, but I'll sleep later than 6. But I got to sleep, and I don't know what my deal is. But you know what I've also learned in life is it's not always the end result, because that can be anticlimactic. Really, it's the getting there.
Mm-hmm.
It's the I've actually gotten, like, when I do a project, when I built that cabin or whatever, the things outside that I built out of just complete boredom. At the end, I'm like, that's so cool. As I'm thinking about building it, it's in my head. And as I'm building it, I enjoy that way more than that now that it's built, because I've been in it like 3 times since I built it. I don't give a shit. You know, I'm like, well, all I know is there's no more room to build anything else. That's all I know. So it's the end result part of it as well, I found. I mean, it's the that's not as important as the driving to it.
Yeah, there's a journey of it.
Yeah,
there's a self-satisfaction, you know, and like a man being a man, right? A dude who can just be self-sufficient.
Yes.
They can look at something like, I need something there, I got to build it. There's so many younger people that don't have that in them, because you can buy everything on Amazon, right? But back in the day, I used to despise asking my dad for anything, because we'd never be able to buy it. You had to build it. I remember I wanted to like get into DJing, you know, like had like old crappy turntable. It wasn't really like the real DJ ones, but I wanted to like put it on a table. So I wanted to buy a folding table, you know, just a 5-foot folding table. Why the hell you need to go buy one? I got an old door. You can put a cord through the hole. I'm thinking like,
Here we go.
I'm like, I can't go on stage. Here I'm thinking I'm going to be like headlining fucking a B-side or something. Yeah. You know, I'm like, I can't use a door. Like, it's all wobbly and stuff, you know. He takes the door down. We're banging away on it, you know, making braces and stuff. It's solid. But I'm like, it's a freaking door. Like, but he was the guy who would always like, let's see if we can build it first.
Mm.
And I didn't even appreciate that till later in life, where got my first house, and I'm like, I'm gonna put new floors in here. Like, wasn't even a thing. I'd helped him on so many projects. You know, we'd do that in the summer with side houses and build stuff. And it's a skill that I picked up that I didn't even realize I picked up.
It's an important one, isn't it?
Right? You know, especially like fixing your brakes on your car. You know, like he might be yelling at you the whole time. No, I took the needles and the spring and this, you know. You're like, well, why don't you just do it then? You know, like,
Mhm.
you know. So, and I think that's huge because now he was young. I mean, he's like 27 probably at that
Mhm.
time when he was able to, you know, like I was getting into the age of wanting to build stuff and things like that. Like now for my son, I got him build him a little workbench, got his own little tools over there. Like we always talk about it. I already teach him how to 3D print. Like we are like on it. Like my life's crusade is to like give him everything I got in my brain, even if it's crazy, give it to him. Because those life lessons are huge. You know, that's something that'll pave the way for the rest of your life. Work ethic, you know, appreciation, help people, you know, all those things that you think are stupid when you're a teenager and you're just like, you can't tell me what to do. Damn, are they important? I mean, just
Oh,
how to
craziness.
treat people.
Yes. It's
You know, and you and I have always got along. First day I met you, I was like, it's like out of a MASH episode. I was like, oh my God.
What was the first thing I tried to help you do is do your travel voucher or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a
And
travel
I was
voucher.
like, you know, you can claim. You can claim cleaning. Anybody didn't do any cleaning. I'm like, yeah, but you can claim cleaning.
And I was like, but I didn't.
You're like, but I didn't do nothing. But you don't seem to understand.
I remember going back in the office going, oh God, maybe I should do some dry cleaning.
I'm like, well, yeah, well, don't do it then.
I was
But
like,
you can.
tell me something. That made me think like a whole new level of thinking. I'm like, I never even thought about that. You know?
You can't do that anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, but we respect each other though, which
Yeah.
I think is different. And then we both had these very different upbringings, but a lot of the same lessons along the way.
Right.
You know, even though we had different styles and all that kind of stuff, like you said, we ended up in the same place.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
It is fascinating.
It is. And I laugh about it all the time. I'm like, man, you know, it's like you're literally like, you just claw your way, like, you know, that old folktale, John Henry, right? Through the mountain. Get out the other side, there's like, hey guys, you know, like, there's Paul. I'm like, what the fuck did he... Oh yeah, I just walked around. Like,
Yeah. I'm like water. I'll take the path of least resistance.
and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just hilarious to me.
Oh Lord. Well, let's go back. So you were in D.C. and then so where'd you go from there?
So I worked there for a couple of years, did the grind out there, and I was starting to get a little disenfranchised with like the Hill people, you know, the political
Yes.
aspect of it all, because everything had this like weird tint of shit on it. That everywhere you went, you know, you go to a bar, you go wherever to go hang out, and then everyone's like tied to somebody. Like, oh, who do you work for? Like, hey, I'm just here to do a job.
I couldn't
I'm
take that.
I'm here to make people safe, and this is what I'm doing. And all these people are like, well, oh, you ain't gonna get me anywhere, so they won't even talk to you. That's really a weird.
God, that's
It's
crazy.
like Hunger Games out there, you know, for real. Unless you get your own little clique, which is, you know, you can do that. So I took that job, and then I got commissioned. Very blessed. Got a commission in the Air Force to become an intel officer. So that kind of took me about a year to go through training, go to the intel school again, and all that stuff. And then a couple like short deployments. And then when I kind of landed with all that stuff, I actually took a job doing anti-terrorism stuff for the military. It was basically like base hardening, working with the local law enforcement, you know, trying to keep, you know, that base and those assets and all that stuff safe. You know, your briefing and doing research on all the other places that everyone's going. You know, making sure that we're all set up. A couple deployments in there.
Is that Afghanistan you were in?
And that was Iraq.
All right.
So I did that for a couple of years, and then I really, and it was kind of pseudo law enforcement because you work a lot with the security forces and you work a lot with FBI and all the agencies. But I still felt like man, something's missing. So I actually was coming through Tennessee, and I was in the airport here in Nashville, and I was like, I really like Tennessee. Like, holy crap! Like, this is, you kind of got 4 seasons. I said, but I just felt good about it.
All in one day someday.
Yeah, like versus Siberia, you know, where I was at, here in Wisconsin. So I went on USA Jobs, found a job, and I applied for a job working for the U.S. Attorney here. There's a U.S. Attorney in basically every state. You know, sometimes they have multiple U.S. Attorney offices, but that's the highest level of federal prosecution that you can get in this country. So, and that was basically being their intel and national security specialist. So any kind of terrorist cases, any kind of national security type cases, they needed an intel guy to kind of help with the investigation, with all the classified stuff. And while I was there, I also ran a bunch of white collar investigative groups and stuff like that. So I really got back into law enforcement again.
That's the Tennessee Bureau of.
No, that's different. I did work with TBI.
You went there too, as well. Though.
Yeah, so I kind of had a desk over at the Fusion Center at the TBI, where they have that. And then I worked over at the Joint Tourism Task Force. So I did that for several years. And then I started getting all kinds of injuries. I mean, you
Yeah.
all kinds of surgeries and all this stuff. And I was really trying to get back into badge carrying. I had a offer from Homeland Security, and then the funding didn't come through, so I had to reapply. I mean, so some of the stuff on the federal side really takes forever. But then I sort of had this unique opportunity, to work full time for the military again, as a GS and guardsman on the weekend. And, oh man, it's a I don't know if I regret it or if I'm happy I did. It's probably both, right? Because it's a grind. It's you know all the stories of the craziness out there. But it was God actually told me to do that. Really interesting. Yeah.
That is
I was just like, really? That's what you want me to do? Like, I could do way more. I could do so much stuff. And it actually kind of worked out really good because I had the opportunity to work for JSOC.
You got to do it for a whole year, didn't you?
There, yeah, and then coming back and working with AFSOC and really getting into some very high level stuff. And I got to work with some great people and some yahoos at the same time. And but it was all under the same umbrella, right? It's all under like, hey, let's find the needle in the haystack. Let's do this because of belief in country and God and the military and all this stuff. It's all in the same sort of auspice of defending people, defending the thing, country being the thing. And so very blessed, man. I got to be a commander, all that kind of stuff. It was, you asked me back when I first joined and I had to get out of town.
Yeah.
That was definitely.
You had no idea, did you?
Oh my God, even some of the guys that came to my retirement, like, I cannot believe you were colonel. You were a commander. I'm like, yeah, I know, because we were out there like making MRE bombs and doing dumb shit. Like, the same guys, man.
Well, even in your post retirement, you're doing security stuff.
A little bit, yeah. I work as a director for a family business, and one of the little pillars of the things I do is I oversee a private security company. A lot of other things as well, but every once in a while I get to load up and help out with certain events, especially ones that are like the highly political ones. They have a lot of meetings and stuff with like the governor and senators and stuff like that. So usually those times you want to match security with security. So I get to do some of that stuff here and there. It's fun. But I enjoy that world. It's just some people want to be. They want to work in a car dealership, and that's their world. They love sales, right? Like your last guest, he was like you just listen to him, you're like, wow, he loves what he's doing.
He does.
Like this is the stuff,
and he's so good at it.
Yeah, and this is the stuff that I love doing.
Yeah,
like just this world. I'm comfortable in it. I'm competent in it. It makes me want to wake up in the morning. Now I could go the other direction and work supply logistics for Walmart, and I'd hate my life. Could I do it? Probably, but I wouldn't like it. It would, you have to find that thing that makes you happy.
Well, and we're blessed to do something. I don't know how rare it is, but not everybody gets to do for a living what they like to do. Some people are, and I've done all kinds of different things. Working in the factory, it was fun, but it wasn't. It's working in the factory. But working on planes was a joy for me.
Yeah, like you could see it in your eyes when
I loved it.
I would come down, if you knew this, I'd come down and talk to you, and I know you'd be like, you weren't liking what you're doing, and I'd just ask you a question about the planes.
I'd light up.
Man, you would just, you'd be happy, and I'm like, that's my guy right there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was, and even though doing what I did right before I retired, I enjoyed helping the people. The people was what kept me there.
Yeah.
Because I really loved them and enjoyed them coming down and talking. You know, not only would I help them with whatever was going on, but we had discussions, and I really kind of why I started doing this because I missed doing that.
Right.
You know, I was easy. People just come by and talk to me. Now I'm sitting here with the cat going, you know, what's up? He don't say a whole lot, you know. So I'm like, I'm gonna start doing this. That'll be cool.
I remember, you know, some people be like, yeah, they're like, oh, I had a guy waiting on, who's that guy downstairs? Sergeant Black. What's up with him? I'm like, he's fucking cool as hell. You know, I'm like, you just got to sit there and talk to him, man. He's a fascinating guy. They're like, really? I'm like, hey, just because he doesn't want to run, you know, a 10 miles at a time, you know, it doesn't mean that he's, you know, a bad dude. And I always thought you had like the best job because you just got to sit right in the hot corner. The hot corner.
It was fascinating for a few years.
Because you got to hear all the conversations. You got to see the faces coming out of the main office. Like, oh shit. You know, you just had this great purview of people watching. You know, and
which is my favorite thing to do.
That's what I think translates into this a lot because you just got to just see the human dynamic in all levels of tears and joy. This is the last day they're going to be in this building.
Well, exactly.
So hey, this guy's going to be a 2-star general now, or whatever, right? I mean, this is fascinating.
The interactions between the different levels and the different. It was always interesting just to watch, you know, and sometimes have behind the scenes knowledge of what's going on and to be able to help. It was fun. It was a fun thing to do. I actually enjoyed that part of it as much as I did on planes, but the planes were, like, that's a joy. That was a joy for me.
But I'd imagine that on the plane, the gravity of not getting that right is the implications is that plane crashes and they die.
Right. Or
that plane can't leave today. Like, so there's a, we need this. Where's our closer? Paul, get in here. Psst, psst. You know, and you're doing all the electrical work to the importance of that.
Versus a spreadsheet. That's hard to, exactly.
You know, people can say it all day long, like, I make spreadsheets and it makes me happy. Okay, well, you're weird, but okay. But fixing some shit and, like, getting it out is got to be a great feeling.
Yeah, being able to fix something that's broke and people get in it and fly in it and they trust you and you trust what you did, that's a good feeling.
And when the pilot walks by and goes, hey, thanks, Paul. Like, it's a real thank you, you know, because they needed to go. So,
there's nothing that can. In my life, there's nothing more the work related top that.
Yeah. And I get like some of the people that I worked with that worked for me were. How do I phrase this in a better way? They're challenging, but I also realized that they got reclassed into a job that they don't even like. They don't want to do it. Because they were so good at what they used to do, and it was important, and that's actually what they signed up for.
They were amazing at what they used to do.
So I never would discount that. I would say, okay, but I don't need you to be good at that anymore. I need you to be good at this right here today. Because if you're not good at it, the younger guys are going to go like, they don't even care if we're good at it or not. You know, there's so many layers of that, but I do understand from the perspective, at least you were probably one of the few that were able to move on and be like, well, hey, this is my new life. Let me just find the best version of this new job I got. That's not what I used to do, and just ride it out as best I can.
Yeah, and at first it was hard.
It was hard. I remember, because when you had to go to the school, you were like beside yourself. You didn't even want to leave. You were just like, damn, this is for real. Like, there is no going back. It wasn't just you had to leave for X amount of time.
Right.
You were like, damn. Any glimmer of hope that old job was coming back.
Yeah, it's gone.
Like, as soon as you graduate from there, it's gone. So I get that. That's hard.
It was hard to go from, as you say, that level of importance, what you thought, you know, in your job, to doing something you're like, Jesus, you know. But what the saving thing for me was to help the interaction with the people and to be kind of like the assistant to the colonel, which that to me was like that was always been a dream of mine, to be like a I don't know, the executive officer type thing. Not that I was an officer, but it was kind of like performing that role, you know.
You're definitely
and I always really tried to take care of whoever it was, you know.
Yeah, you did. You did good. You never turned anybody down. You know, that was the thing. It's like you could have easily lost paperwork, you know, or done something, but you always treated people no matter how they treated you. At least the appearance of it is like you could be cursing them under your breath, but you still did your job and you did what you were supposed to do. Because at the end of the day, people's paycheck also relied on you. You know, people's livelihood. You know how many hundreds and hundreds of sets of orders and all that kind of stuff you had to process. Like, if that orders don't get sent, that guy might not pay his bills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, like all that stuff, you know, is not oblivious to, you know, myself.
Well, the one thing that made me try to treat everybody like that was I knew what it was like when I'd go ask for help years ago, and the people that were helping you didn't seem to want to.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'll never make anybody feel that way. I don't care if you see me in the middle of something. If you want to stop me, just all you got to do is say, hey, this can be done later. This is, you know, you're doing me a favor to keep me from doing this bullshit. Just let me help you is the more important thing. So that was because I didn't want to make anybody feel that way. Yeah. It's a shitty feeling, you know.
But that's actually why I am starting this gun company, right? Is super experienced shooter, competition shooter, instructor, lifelong gun guy. Went to a local gun shop, and a guy treated me like I was the biggest idiot. You know,
really?
Like, yeah, he was like straight up lying to me. Like, he was this older guy. He's grumpy. He didn't even want to be there. And I asked him like a really unique, specific question, and I said, and if you don't know, if you guys got a gunsmith, you know, maybe I could talk to him. Well, you know this, and he tried to bullshit me, and I'm like, Clary didn't know my background. Like 3 seconds in, he's lying to me. I'm like, that's what I'm like, smash. but I realized, and then we're talking with some of the younger guys that work for me, you know, all in like the cyber intelligence career field, and not a lot of like gun-toting people. I was like, wow, there's going to be a day when we're not here, and that next generation is going to be the backbone of this country. And I was like, man, if I go into the gun store and the dude treats me like I'm an idiot, how do you think these younger guys feel when they don't even know anything about guns? Mm-hmm. You think that guy's going to be the catalyst to make this person interested in the Second Amendment and buying a gun? So that's where I came up with the crazy idea of like this younger, super cybernetic gun company kind of thing, right? And but it's also, I can't ever shut my brain off. Right? You know, I got 5 million ideas, but I only got time today for 1 million.
Exactly.
But yeah, really like the part of not making them feel inferior when they go to make a purchase. Because I would teach handgun classes, and yeah, it's really interesting. The very, very beginning of the class, you got like 10 guys in there, and it's like, yeah, can't wait to shoot somebody in the face. Yeah, and then when you hit them with all legal stuff, like, you're not a vigilante. Here's all the stuff you can't do.
Exactly.
And then they come to you later and go, hey, I got a question. Like, and not make them feel like crap for asking that question. You know, I that's where I get some of this post-retirement joy from, is, you know, in some of that world too. Because you're still helping defend people, helping people defend themselves, and you're helping people.
Well, you know, there's somebody said once that people may forget what you say, but they'll make you forget how you made them feel, you know.
Right.
And like you was talking about being a supervisor, when I was a supervisor for a few years at that factory I worked at, I always felt like it was my job to go in and remove obstacles because they knew what the hell they were doing. All I had to do is make it easier for them to do what they were doing and keep them out of trouble.
Right.
And so I always felt like that was my top priority, was keep everybody safe mainly. And then the second one was to make their life for that 8 hours as smooth as I could make it. Yeah. And then in return, I hope they gave me my units that I needed, because that was the biggest thing, or I would be having a job a week later, you know.
But that's the trust in humanity, right?
Mm-hmm.
The trust is, if I do these 3 things correctly and I treat you the way that you hopefully want to be treated, in kind, you'll produce the widgets for me.
Right.
Right. And that doesn't seem like a bad bartering system.
It's not.
In real life, because that's how real life should work. You go to give me 5, and the lady at the counter like snatches the money out of your hand. It doesn't matter. It's still a $5 exchange, but how she made you feel by snatching the money, you never go to that line again. Like, no, if I see that woman, I'm gonna ram my cart into her ankles. You know, right?
But that equation works, but there will always be a percentage of that don't buy into that equation. There'll always be some that are like, no matter how many obstacles you remove for them and how safe you make them, they're just not gonna go with the flow and help you out. So then the challenge becomes, how do I motivate whoever they are?
Right.
How do I get them to get on? That, to me, when I was a supervisor, was the most exciting part of it. It's like, I've got all these people. How am I going to get them all on the same sheet of music without them knowing I'm trying to get them all on the same sheet of music? That's where you do a lot of gymnastics as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's very hard, and not a lot. Everybody can do that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of human dynamic. I thought, well, to go back to some of the law enforcement stuff, there's this really profound, unique interaction that you have with a person who's committed a crime. There's a cat and mouse, right, just like you see on TV. And they know they did it. You've got them. Now you just got to present a couple things to them to try to get them to admit that they did it.
Yeah, the interrogation. I love watching that stuff.
All while they've already got an alibi,
Mm-hmm.
or their version of an alibi.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just this weird, like,
It's a dance, isn't
it's
it?
a dance, right? And it all kind of works together. And I really enjoyed that. I know some of my old partners see this, they'll laugh. That to me was probably the most, besides the physical part of like chasing and fighting with people, is the unraveling of the mystery in front of them. To walk out of there and going, unfortunately, I broke this person.
Mm-hmm.
And they told the truth, or the closest version of their truth they could muster. And then by doing that, I've defended the populace.
Mm-hmm.
I did my job. Not to get them to make up anything, not to charge them with shit they didn't need to be charged with. I remember plenty of times the people would get so hung up on like getting a confession about something. Like sometimes they call the drug unit, especially like a local cop, arrested somebody that had some narcotics with them. There was some rules and procedures where if it was over a certain amount, you had to call a drug unit to go in and do the interviews and stuff like that. And this, they call me in. I get to the district station where I was at. Talk to the cop. I'm like, what's going on? He's like, he ain't gonna admit anything. He's an asshole. Well, he's a piece of shit. He ain't gonna tell you anything. I'm like, well, what did he do? He's like, well, he had these narcotics on him. I'm like, anything else? Did he like fight with you or run? No. F that guy. I'm like, all right. So like I go up to the room, I look in, you can just tell he's just like defiant.
Mm-hmm.
So I go in, boom, I kick the door open, it like slams. I'm like, you the asshole that shot the cop? He's like, no man, I just had some weed. I'm like, all right, sorry man. Shut the door. I'm like, that's how you gotta do it, man.
Just admit it.
You're not trying to get this guy to admit he killed Jimmy Hoffa.
Right.
He just had some weed. Like, it's super easy. Like a little bit of distraction, a little bit of, I was like, I'll be in there in a minute and talk to you. So I went in there and, oh, what's going on, man? Just as a human, like, unless that guy's going to confess to all kind of other crimes, why are you in there for 6 days trying to
Exactly.
talk about some stuff that he didn't even do? Just get the thing that you need, the elements of the crime, what he did. I miss some of that.
I bet that's I love watching it. I'll watch them for hours. That stuff.
And it's interesting because, like what you see on TV, I mean, it's really fascinating because there's some detectives that I work with that were they put on such a master class of balancing every possible thing: respect, being hard, being comforting, being understanding of the person's situation, knowing everything about the law, how to set the hook, how to give them a break, give them a bologna sandwich, make them feel good, close the deal. I mean, it was just like this. A lot of times I'd sit outside the room, especially some of the good interviewers, and I'd be sitting there going, oh man, you can think of that, But I also had ones that I know they never thought of the shit I'd come up with.
Right. Like the one you just talked about.
Yeah, so I always had this attitude of like, if my whole entire life is focused on this one guy and it doesn't work out, I don't want my whole life to unravel and be unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is just one guy in his situation that's doing something wrong. And we're only 2 out of 7 billion people in the world. Like
I watch the behavior panel and they talk about it. They go into pre-confession, and I mean that like it's a list of stuff like what you just I think you almost did it in order of how that works, like the read technique and all the different things you use. But and it's the same every time I watch one. You can watch them on YouTube. You can watch hours and hours of them. And they come in. And originally, they come in. They're really friendly. Just hey, we're all buddies. And some of them go real quick to the hey, this is what we got. Some start giving it out a little at a time, and it's fascinating to watch that.
Yeah, it's almost like a dance. Right?
Absolutely like a dance.
And each interviewer is a specialist in a certain kind of dance. There's just certain crimes that really just get underneath your skin, and my hat's off to some of those investigators that they work in those divisions for 10, 20 years because they're so passionate and they're so good at it. Like I said, narcotics is probably a good one for me. The gang stuff is pretty good. The intel stuff, easy, made sense, felt comfortable, but yeah, I couldn't do the child exploitation stuff. That just I think I just need to murder somebody. That'd be my only way to feel good.
Be interrogated.
I didn't say that. But it's a fascinating world, man. It sucks that we need it, and I think you've seen over the last 8 years, probably the last 4 years more than anything, criminals just walking all over everybody. You're like, damn, like I freak out if I'm 5 cents off of my taxes.
Right.
Like, oh man, I don't want to get audited. No, you're going to ask for a deduction on this. And these people are out there just murdering people, getting out the next day. It's like, what the hell's going on with this world? But I think it's history, right? I mean, it's just, if you look at history throughout time, the Romans
swings back and forth.
Yeah, Romans fell apart. They got too big. It cost too much to run that big of an empire. They had 50,000 different languages. It just got too watered down. And I just hope that our country can kind of get back to like the core of it. Because if you just if you just read the Constitution, it's pretty good. I mean, it pretty much lets you know, like, if you just stay within these bounds, you're gonna have a great country here. You always got to push it.
Just got to follow it.
Yeah, it's a good guideline. Right?
Yes, absolutely. So, do you? What would you recommend someone that's young and thought about doing what you did to get on those? What advice would you give them?
Well, a lot of times, even to get in like law enforcement, you got to have a certain level of education. You know what I mean? You have to have like either 60 credits or a 4-year degree. It just depends on what department it is. Knock out that easy stuff. Some people are always like, should I get a criminal justice degree? Oh, I'd get a computer science degree, because the ability for you to do crimes in investigations nowadays, it's almost impossible to investigate something without some nexus to a cell phone, computer, or some kind of technology, cameras and all that kind of stuff.
It's in everything, isn't it?
Yeah, our world is so technologically driven that I would think the more proficient you are with all kinds of levels of technology, the better investigator you'll be, because that won't be your hang-up. Your hang-up will be like catching the guy, not like, what do I do with all this forensic information? Back in the day, in the 50s, when you had fingerprints, like, okay, wow. You only had a couple things to use, as far as tools. You didn't have to track emails and all this stuff. So now it's a lot more complex. So I would say, really get your chops up when it comes to any kind of technology. Second, you got to want to do it. You're going to be hated. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic. I always said I should have been a firefighter, excuse me, because a firefighter can show up to a wedding with a firefighter T-shirt, and he'll go home with the bridesmaids and shit. Cop shows up, wears his T-shirt to damn Walmart. He's getting spit on and like hacked at, damn. I grew up that. I hate cops, right? Like, it's just like, you're just so
it's just a thing.
You're just easy to be hated. So you got to be okay with nobody liking you. And then understanding that 1 out of every 100 calls that you get, one person is going to appreciate what you did. And that's hard, because, buddies of mine who are retiring now, they've been doing it 20, 30 years, right? That's a lot of hate that you got to deal with. And you got to come home and try to be normal to your wife and kids and your husband and kids. I mean, that's a challenge of not being, I have a really dark sense of humor, and mostly because of the department. Like you see death every day. You got to go. I tell you, it's sad, man. Like they make a big deal about like when the military loses someone and the colonel or general walks to the house and makes the notification. It's sad. It's heartbreaking. You do that almost every day in the police department. They go make a notification. So-and-so got killed in some drive-by. That's still a mom. That's still a dad. That's still a son. That's still a daughter. So it's not like what you see on TV. There's a lot of dirty work that you got to do as part of that job that is so underappreciated and unrespected, by society that you got to have tough skin. So I'm not trying to dissuade anyone. I think it's even if you don't want to do police work for a whole career, it would be great if that was a compulsory service to this country, that you did military or law enforcement or firefighting. You did something bigger than yourself. Because I tell you what, you get a lot more citizens who appreciate shit around here, right? You do a dirty job that no one likes to do, even for a couple of years, and then you can go back and go work in the factory or go do something. I think that'd be fascinating. I think there'd be a lot more appreciation for law and order and respect and all that kind of stuff. So
that's exactly. You don't really appreciate it unless you've been through it.
No, and I, as much as I miss it, I'm like, man, it is a hard.
I can't imagine it nowadays.
Everything you do is wrong. Why are you in my neighborhood? Get the F out of here. Where were you? I needed you 1 minute ago.
Right. Why ain't there a cop around when whatever?
Well, what did you see? I didn't see nothing. Like, you literally, I watched the car drive by you and shoot at you, and you didn't see that car? No, I didn't see anything.
It makes you wonder why anybody would actually want to do
You're
that.
like,
It would have to be a desire, or you wouldn't do it. Just like teachers, you have to love children. You don't want to be a teacher.
oh my God.
You couldn't just do that just to do it.
So, my buddy Chris, he's the chief of police for Laverne now. He was my field training officer, one of them when I first joined. And we had done a traffic stop in this alley. And the alley was between two streets. And we had this guy, we're just, frisking him, make sure he don't have anything, getting his name. Also, we hear like, boom, 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 boom. We're like, I look at each other, I was like, is that a hammer? Shit. It was like a rolling gun battle, right? The two streets in between the alley. They're like,
Oh my God!
right? Like for 3 blocks, like 3 city blocks, just shooting at each other through these houses, right? Just shooting at each other. The gun come between a house. Nice up. Like I was like, oh yes! I run out to where I hear the gunfire from, and I see a car, like Monte Carlo or something, speed off. So anyway, calling like the cavalry, like hundreds of gunshots. So we're literally going for 3 city blocks, every house. And this is summer, so everyone's outside. Not one person saw anything. Not even one person. But they're like this. Yeah, man, I was on my sports. I was like, bang, bang, bang. I don't hear. I was like, well, what did you see? Man, I didn't see nothing. Can't wait.
What's up with the people that stop and then they're like, well, I'm not rolling my window down, and they do all this. It's like, why are you screwing with him? Just give him what he needs and go on with your life. Why are you screwing with the guy? He could be out doing something else instead of screwing with you for half an hour.
It's mostly a learned behavior. Like some people just like to stick it to anybody. Like they, like you said, there's just certain people who they don't believe in that, treat people good, and they're just like, today I'm going to put up the most resistance to anything in the world.
Just because.
They go to work and they're like, well, the union says I don't have to push this button till now. Go ahead, make me. They're just those people that just live their life that way, and you can't.
It's sad. Some people you can't do anything with.
Yeah, and you can't make them happy. So I see a lot of that as a learned behavior. They'll watch some YouTube videos on like sovereign citizens, like people like, well, uniform commercial code, something says I don't have to. And you're like,
or the guy that videos, he takes the video camera around in places like he's in the post office, like, and wondering why people coming up to him. Well, then the policeman has to come up and go, well, they're asking me to find out what you're doing. I'm just exercising my right or whatever. Well, here's the deal. On a human level, you're making these people uncomfortable when they're at their job. Why don't you get the fuck out of here quit screwing people, and instead of exercising your rights, why don't you go fight for them for a little while?
Yeah.
How about doing something that, you know?
Yeah. There's this antagonist.
It's so
right? That's
irritating to see that.
But they found their niche in life.
Oh,
Maybe
yeah.
that makes them happy.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
But yeah, we get those guys every once in a while. You're like, oh god, here we go.
Yeah.
You know, you just got to be a professional. And when you really want to just punch them in the face, 100 times. But you just got to like bite your tongue and be like, all right, man, this is what makes you happy in life.
Yeah. You going with your sad life.
Yeah. Like, I don't got time for this. Yeah, so you see a lot of that, man. But a lot of this is learned behavior, right? Because, nowadays you could just yell out any kind of microaggression, and people are so afraid to get labeled anything. Like, hey, how you doing today, sir? I'm not a sir. I'm a ma'am.
Or whatever.
Okay, sorry. What do you mean, sorry? Sorry is an ungentrified word for like, oh gosh. Like there's so many people that are afraid to have anything thrown at them like that, that they just don't do anything. They just, yes ma'am, yes, or, they just go with the flow.
Yeah, they don't want any way.
So I think we're starting to see, the last couple of months, some of this madness come to an end, which is nice. Just get back to just normal bickering. Like what football team you like or not. Like normal shit. Not
quit inventing shit to get pissed off about. There's enough out there to be mad about instead of inventing it,
Yeah, and unfortunately, they've also created a boogeyman, right? The boogeyman didn't kill anybody, and now they're coming out with part 2 of the boogeyman, and they're mad that you don't believe them. And you're like, it's all fictitious. It's all stuff that you're making up. It's like, don't be mad at me because I don't want to believe in your craziness anymore. Like, yeah, that's another.
That's
got like 10 videos lined up.
That's another video.
Yeah.
Well, tell everybody about the name of your website before we end this.
Oh yeah, it's called Gundalorium.com. It's like, think about it as the universe of guns, and it's all centered around characters called Gundalorians. So imagine any kind of fictitious, hero of yours. John Wick and Luke Skywalker. All those personas are sort of wrapped up in this whole website, big merch shop and all this stuff. I should have worn a shirt, but it's really a new way to purchase firearms online. Everything goes through dealers, so it's not like you get a gun mailed to your house. We're trying to create a better user experience for customers and not have it be just transactional. We're also trying to build a community of Gundalorians. Discord, all the social media channels and all this stuff. Trying to open it up and have much more friendly conversations about guns and gadgets and shit that you need to be the hero of your own story. So,
isn't there a game that you're coming out with?
There's a video game coming out called Rise of the Gundalorians. It's on mobile devices, iOS and Android.
Is it out already?
No, I've been demoing the first version, but like the Google Store and Apple are really like nitpicky about the insides of the game, making sure all the code, there's no malicious code and everything lines up. But they're also like super sassy about like, oh well, it's got a picture of a gun. Like, you guys got 500 games of guns. What? It's called Gundalorians. So they're just working through the minutia of the app stores. It's probably been equally as difficult to create in a game. But yeah, that'll be out pretty soon.
Cool. That's so exciting. So you're making use of your time after retirement, aren't you?
Yeah. How often have you ever called me? What are you doing? I'm just sitting down doing nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm never that way. It's like we are very busy people, aren't we? And you're without a doubt probably the most creative person I've ever known. So always a pleasure.
Love you, buddy.
I'm so glad we got to do this.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's always a joy, man.
We always have a good time.
When I told V I was coming, and she's like, "Oh, you love Paul." I'm like, I know. I never get to see him, So